in the bustling Iron Will Martial Arts Academy located in the heart of Manhattan, New York. The bright overhead lights gleamed over the clean mat. It was the end of a long day, and most students had already gone home. At the center of the mat stood Liam, a martial arts instructor whose black belt clearly signaled his expertise. He was known for being a bit arrogant, always boasting about his skills and achievements. His black belt, a symbol of his status, seemed to shine even brighter under the light, drawing the attention of everyone still lingering nearby. On that particular Thursday evening, the advanced class training had run longer than usual. Because of this, 8 students were still in the academy, watching as Charles, the newly hired janitor, finished his work. Charles was a calm and reserved 42-year-old man. He had started working at the academy only 3 weeks prior, and his routine was always the same. He arrived after the rush died down, when the students were leaving, to clean undisturbed. He preferred to go unnoticed, and there was a good reason for it. Charles carried a deep secret, something even his teenage daughter didn't know. 20 years ago, he had been a world champion in mixed martial arts, a true legend in the ring. But a tragic accident, which cost the life of his best friend and training partner, Rodrigo, forced him to give it all up. Since then, he had lived a simple life, far from the spotlight, trying to forget who he truly had been. The academy's silence was suddenly broken by Liam's loud voice. "Hey, you, the cleaning guy!" he shouted, a mocking smile on his face. "How about a quick demo? Bet you've never seen a real fight in your life, have you?" Liam's voice was full of confidence, almost a challenge, and he looked at Charles as if he were nobody. Charles, who was focused on mopping the floor, stopped what he was doing. He slowly lifted his gaze, his eyes meeting Liam's for a brief moment. "I don't want to disturb you, Sensei," he replied calmly, showing no emotion. He went back to scrubbing a stubborn stain on the floor, acting as if Liam's taunt didn't affect him. He just wanted to finish his work and go home. Liam, however, wasn't satisfied. He let out a loud, theatrical laugh that echoed through the academy, drawing the students' attention. "Look at this, everyone," he exclaimed, gesturing at Charles. "The guy's afraid to even step on the mat." The 8 students present chuckled nervously. Some were clearly uncomfortable with the situation. They didn't like seeing the janitor treated that way. Liam, feeling in control, approached Charles, his arrogant smile even wider. He used that smile to intimidate new students, and now he used it on Charles. "Come on, buddy, just a small demonstration. I bet you don't even know how to do a basic guard. How about showing my students the difference between someone who trains and someone who just cleans?" His words were full of contempt, as if cleaning was an inferior job. Charles felt a strange sensation in his chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time. It was like a muscle that had been dormant for years was now awakening. His eyes met Liam's again, and for a split second, something passed between them that made the instructor involuntarily take a step back. Liam, noticing his own reaction, tried to hide the sudden uncertainty in his voice. "Just an educational demonstration, nothing too serious, just to show the beginners why it's important to respect martial arts." Charles slowly put the bucket down and stood up. His movements, once slow and ordinary, now had a different fluidity, strange for someone who supposedly had never stepped onto a mat before. It was as if every movement was deliberate, precise. Around the academy, the students stopped what they were doing, realizing that something important was about to happen. The atmosphere in the academy shifted from a normal training session to a moment of great expectation. "All right," Charles finally said, his voice low and calm like the surface of a lake before a storm. "But when we're done, you're going to apologize to all of them for turning this place into a sideshow." Liam laughed, but this time the sound was a bit forced, lacking his usual confidence. "Apologize. You're the one who will be apologizing to the floor when you get intimately acquainted with it." He still tried to maintain his superior posture. What no one there knew was that Charles Carlos had once been Charles the Storm, a name that struck fear and respect in the rings. He had been a 5-time world champion in mixed martial arts, one of the greatest of all time. He retired at the peak of his career at 29 after the accident that cost the life of his best friend and training partner, Rodrigo. He had died because of a sequence of punches Charles delivered with excessive force during a training session. Rodrigo fell, hit his head badly on the floor, and never woke up. The official investigation concluded it was an accident, but Charles knew the truth. He had lost control because of the pressure and prejudiced comments from the audience that night. The memory still haunted him. Liam adjusted his black belt with a theatrical gesture, savoring every second of the attention he was getting. "Gather round, everyone," he announced to the students. "You're about to see a practical demonstration of why there is a hierarchy in the world of martial arts." Charles watched as the 8 students formed a semicircle around the mat. Some seemed eager for the demonstration, others visibly uncomfortable, sensing the tension in the air. A young woman of Asian descent, with her hair tied back, named Mariana Tanaka, whispered something to her classmate next to her, who just shook his head in disapproval. She seemed to understand that something was wrong there. "So, Janitor," he sneered, with a cruel smile, "how about you show my students how to do a basic guard? Or is that too complicated for someone who only knows how to push a mop?" Laughter echoed through the academy, but Charles remained motionless, not reacting to the provocations. His eyes closed briefly, and for a moment he was back in that ring at a big international event, hearing the same kinds of comments that preceded the tragedy. That past, which he tried so hard to hide, was resurfacing. "What's the problem? Are you scared?" he insisted, now circling Charles like a predator, trying to intimidate him. "Or are you just going to stand there like a post, like you do all day with the mop?" It was then that Liam made his first, fatal mistake. He lightly pushed Charles on the shoulder, a seemingly harmless touch, but one that carried all the arrogance of someone who had never faced real consequences for his actions. It was a gesture of contempt from someone who felt superior. Charles absorbed the push without moving an inch. His feet remained planted on the floor like oak roots, firm and unyielding. Liam felt as if he had tried to push a concrete wall. The instructor's arrogant smile wavered for a split second, a small crack in his confidence. "Interesting," Charles murmured, more to himself than to Liam. "It's been a long time since anyone tried to provoke me like this." There was something in Charles's voice that changed the atmosphere in the academy. It wasn't a threat or anger, but the terrifying calm of someone who had walked through much darker valleys and emerged transformed. Someone who knew true strength. Liam, unable to understand the danger signs Charles was emitting, doubled down. "Did you hear that, everyone?" he said, forcing a laugh. "He thinks it's interesting. How about we show him the difference between thinking and knowing?" What Liam didn't realize was that every humiliating word and gesture was awakening something in Charles that had been dormant for 2 decades. Not anger or a thirst for revenge, but something far more dangerous. The crystal-clear memory of who he truly was when he stopped hiding. The remembrance of his true identity as a fighter. Mariana Tanaka watched the scene with growing discomfort. There was something in the way the janitor breathed, in the way his muscles tensed, almost imperceptibly, that reminded her of documentaries about great predators she watched, the calm before the attack. She sensed that something big was about to happen. "Last chance, buddy," Liam announced, now clearly irritated by Charles's lack of reaction. "Either you accept the demonstration like a man, or I'll call security to escort you out. And guess what? You lose your job, too." Liam was using every tactic he could to intimidate Charles. Charles slowly opened his eyes. When his gaze met Liam's, the instructor felt a shiver down his spine, as if he had just woken up a dragon he thought was a harmless lizard. That gaze was intense, deep, and carried the experience of years of fighting. "All right," Charles finally said, his voice low, but carrying an authority that instantly silenced everyone present. The academy's usual sounds disappeared, and a heavy silence filled the room. "But when we're done, I want you to explain to your students why you turned this place into a shameful exhibition." Liam laughed, but the sound was nervous, lacking his usual confidence. "Explain? You'll have a lot to explain when you're on the floor." What neither of them knew was that Charles had spent the last 20 years not just running from his past, but perfecting emotional control that had transformed his old destructive fury into something far more refined and devastatingly effective. Every new humiliation only fueled a silent strength within him, a cold determination that his old opponents knew well, but which Liam was about to discover the hard way. Liam took his favorite fighting stance, the one he had used to intimidate hundreds of beginners over the years. Feet shoulder-width apart, fists clenched at chest height, weight slightly forward. It was the classic stance of someone who had learned martial arts in controlled environments against predictable opponents. Charles remained motionless for a few seconds, simply observing. His eyes scanned Liam from head to toe, automatically cataloging every technical detail. He noticed the high guard that left Liam's ribs exposed, the unstable base that compromised his balance, the excessive tension in his shoulders that telegraphed every movement before it even began. "Still waiting?" Liam taunted, lightly bouncing, trying to provoke Charles. "Or are you just going to stand there like a post?" It was then that Charles did something no one expected. He began to move. It wasn't a dramatic change, just a subtle repositioning of his feet, a slight lowering of his center of gravity, his shoulders relaxing into a perfectly horizontal line. But for anyone who knew what to look for, the transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. Charles, the janitor, had disappeared, and in his place was an elite fighter. Mariana felt a shiver down her spine. In 2 years of studying sports biomechanics, she had analyzed hundreds of hours of footage of great fighters. What she had just witnessed was the transition from an ordinary man to a born predator, a change as subtle as it was devastating. "Interesting," Liam murmured, his confidence wavering for the first time. There was something in the way Charles now occupied the space that awakened all of his self-preservation instincts, a warning of danger. Charles stepped forward, and Liam instinctively recoiled. The movement was so involuntary, so primitive, that several students noticed, a black belt backing away from a janitor. The power dynamic in the room had completely shifted. "Any problem?" Charles asked softly, his voice carrying an authority that silenced everyone. Liam felt the blood rush to his face. His reputation was being questioned in front of his own students. He couldn't back down now. "No problem," he replied, forcing a smile. "Just admiring your stance. Did you learn that on YouTube?" The joke fell flat. No one laughed. The tension in the room became almost palpable, heavy in the air. "Actually," Charles said calmly, "I learned it at a place called the Elite Training Center in Philadelphia. Maybe you've heard of it." "Philadelphia? What kind of weekend course did you take there?" He still tried to belittle Charles. Mariana discreetly pulled out her phone and quickly typed, "Elite Training Center, Philadelphia, Martial Arts." What she found made her blood run cold. It wasn't just any short course. It was where the world's greatest MMA champions of the last 3 decades had trained. "Liam," Charles continued, his voice still calm, giving him one last chance, "apologize to Mariana for questioning her right to speak. Apologize to your students for turning this place into a meaningless spectacle. And above all, apologize to yourself for becoming exactly the kind of person martial arts should teach you not to be." The offer of clemency hung in the air. Liam could have chosen humility. Instead, he attacked. Liam's first punch was technically perfect, a quick and precise jab. It was the kind of strike that worked against 99% of the people he had trained with. Charles was not in the 99. The movement was so fast, so fluid, that half of those present couldn't even process what had happened. Charles simply wasn't where Liam's fist was aimed anymore. His body slid to the side like water, bypassing a rock. And suddenly Liam was off balance, his arm extended in the air. "Good try," Charles commented softly, already repositioned and perfectly balanced. "Clean technique, adequate speed, but you telegraphed the movement with your right shoulder." Liam spun wildly, trying to locate his opponent. "Beginner's luck," he mumbled, still trying to convince himself. The second attack came in quick succession. Jab, straight, cross. 3 punches with the precision of someone who had practiced the combination thousands of times. Again, Charles simply wasn't there. He ducked, leaned back, and took a small step backward, making each punch pass inches from his face. "Interesting combination," Charles observed, still breathing steadily, showing no signs of fatigue. "Stop dancing and fight," he yelled, launching an even more aggressive sequence, frustrated by his lack of success. It was then that Charles decided the demonstration had lasted long enough. Liam's third attack met only empty air once more, but this time, when Liam recovered, Charles was inexplicably closer. "How?" Liam whispered, realizing he had completely lost control of the distance. "Liam, now there's an arm's length between us. Do you want to know the difference between someone who learned to fight in academies and someone who learned to fight in professional rings?" Before Liam could answer, Charles did something that defied everything those present thought they knew about physics. Without seeming to use any force, he simply touched Liam's chest with the palm of his right hand. Liam flew. He wasn't pushed or knocked down. He was literally propelled backward, as if hit by an invisible wave. His feet left the ground, and he traveled almost 2 meters through the air, landing on his back with an impact that made everyone in the room gasp. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, and full of awe. Liam lay on the floor for a few seconds, staring at the ceiling. There was no pain, just the irresistible force of someone operating on a completely different level, far beyond his comprehension. This is impossible," Liam stammered, trying to get up. Mariana had stopped breathing. In her studies, she had never witnessed such a controlled and devastating display of power. "Actually," Charles said calmly, extending his hand to help Liam up, "it's quite simple when you understand leverage, timing, and energy transfer. Principles I learned throughout a professional career." Liam ignored the outstretched hand and got up on his own, his legs still trembling, his face pale. "Professional career in what?" he asked, his voice weak. It was Mariana who answered. Her voice was almost a whisper, but clear enough for everyone to hear. "You don't understand who he is, do you?" Everyone turned to her. She still held her phone. On the screen, dozens of articles, photos, and videos confirmed what her instincts had already perceived. "Charles Carlos da Silva," she read aloud, her voice firm, "also known as the Storm, 5-time world champion in mixed martial arts, considered one of the best technical fighters in history. He retired undefeated after an accident that resulted in the death of his training partner." The impact of the words hit the room like a bomb. Liam felt his face pale, the blood draining from his features. He had challenged a living legend, one of the greatest of all time. He had publicly humiliated someone who could have knocked him out with a casual move, effortlessly. Five-time world champion?" Liam stammered, all his arrogance instantly evaporating, replaced by deep shock and shame. Charles nodded silently, confirming Mariana's words. "I retired at 29. Since then, I've worked whatever jobs came my way. Cleaning, maintenance, simple work, simple life, no spotlights, no cameras, no need to prove anything to anyone." Liam's transformation was painful to watch. The arrogant man from minutes ago was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood the magnitude of his ignorance and the mistake he had made. I didn't know," Liam whispered, his voice choked. "If I had known—" "If you had known, you would have treated me with respect," Charles interrupted gently but firmly. "But would you still have humiliated another janitor, another worker who didn't have credentials to defend themselves?" Charles's question cut deeper than any physical blow. It wasn't about him, but about the principle, about the respect that should be given to everyone, regardless of their position or profession. Mariana stepped forward, her voice firm and full of conviction. "Sensei Liam, I trained at this academy for 2 years out of respect for your experience. But what I witnessed today wasn't teaching. It was bullying disguised as instruction." Other students began to murmur in agreement, feeling encouraged by Mariana's courage. They too were tired of Liam's arrogance. "Charles," Liam finally said, his voice filled with a humility no one there had ever heard. It was a voice of genuine regret. I sincerely apologize to you, to Mariana, to everyone here. I have no excuse for my behavior." Charles nodded, accepting the apology. "Appreciated, Liam. But apologies are only the first step. The question is, what will you do differently from now on?" Charles's question wasn't an accusation, but an invitation to reflection and change. It was then that Mariana asked a question that surprised everyone in the academy. She looked at Charles with admiration and respect. "Mr. Charles, would you consider teaching again? Because I think we could all learn so much more from someone who understands that true strength comes with responsibility." The idea of having a world champion as a teacher was something they never would have imagined. Charles smiled. It was the first genuine smile anyone had seen from him that night, a smile that lit up his face and showed the kindness behind his calm demeanor. "Perhaps," he replied, "but not to teach fighting techniques, but to teach something much more important, that respect isn't earned with belts or titles, but with character." He wanted to teach a lesson that went beyond punches and victories. 3 months later, the academy was completely transformed. Iron Will Martial Arts had a new glow, a new energy. Charles Carlos was no longer just the janitor who cleaned the floors. Mariana had convinced the academy owner to hire him as a specialized instructor in advanced techniques and the philosophy of martial arts. Charles's classes were different. He didn't just teach movements, but also the principles of respect, humility, and control. The students adored him, and the academy was fuller than ever. Liam, on the other hand, faced the consequences of his actions. He lost half of his students in the first week after the incident. The video Mariana had discreetly recorded, showing a black belt being humiliated by a simple janitor, spread rapidly online. His reputation in the martial arts community in New York and beyond was ruined. He continued to teach, but in a smaller academy, with far fewer students, and now with a humility forced by public shame. He had learned a hard lesson. "Sensei Charles," Mariana said, after a class on respect, a grateful smile on her face, "thank you for teaching me that true strength doesn't need to be displayed to be recognized." Charles smiled back, organizing the equipment at the end of class. "The best lesson is simple, Mariana. Never judge someone by their profession or appearance. Everyone carries stories that can surprise us." He paused, looking at the now empty mat. "Sometimes justice arrives in silence, like a storm that transforms everything without making a sound." Charles proved that true revenge isn't about destroying your opponent, but about showing that greatness comes from character, humility, and respect, not from titles or belts. He had found his purpose again, not in fighting rings, but in the academy, teaching life lessons that were far more valuable than any punch. This was proof that character is worth more than any title. For more lessons like this, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.